Hey guys, my name is Haley, and today we're going to be filming a reading wrap-up again because I've read quite a few things in the last couple of weeks, so we're just going to jump right on into it. So I started off the month, or right after I filmed my last reading wrap-up, by reading a bunch of Doctor Who audiobooks, because I found a bunch of them are narrated by David Tennant, and I have listened to one of them before, of a book that I actually do own physically, and that is The Stone Rose. And I had a great time because I love David Tennant. So I found probably, I think, 5 of them that were narrated by him. And some of them were Ten and Rose. And if I had to pick like an OTP of fictional couples, that would be my like ultimate favorite. It is Ten and Rose. So the 10th Doctor and Rose. And I adore them so much. So I was really excited to find audiobooks not only narrated by David Tennant, but also with Ten and Rose as the main characters. So I read a couple of those. The first one being The Resurrection Casket. Ooh, that's too bright. Is that better? Yeah. The first one being The Resurrection Casket, which quite honestly was not my favorite like Doctor Who adventure ever told, but it had Ten and Rose in it. I loved their dynamic so much, and it was being read to me by David Tennant with his like doctor accent, and I loved it. I had a great time. The story is more of a like 2 or 3 star. The audiobook is a solid like 3.5, 4 stars, so I went for a 3.5 rating overall. Okay, I can't get the next one to pull up picture-wise because I don't think it exists in physical form. I think it's like exclusively an audiobook, and it's called Doctor Who Dead Air, which I believe is like an Audible exclusive or something at one point. It definitely won Best Audiobook like a couple years ago when it came out, I believe in 2010. And it's just the 10th Doctor, so David Tennant's Doctor. And it was one of the best audiobook experiences of my life. 1, because I love David Tennant and I love when he reads audiobooks. And 2, the story was just super interesting, and like the quality of the audiobook was fantastic. I gave that 4.5 stars apparently on Goodreads, but really it's like a 4.75. It was great. It's one of the best audiobook experiences that I've ever had. And I don't know if that's just because I'm biased because I love Doctor Who, like it's my favorite TV show, but yeah, I adored it. If you're gonna listen to any Doctor Who audiobook, definitely listen to Dead Air. Then the next Doctor Who audiobook that I listened to, I swear I read things other than Doctor Who audiobooks, but these were all like 2 hours long, so I just like binge read all of them in like a day or 2, I want to say. But the next one was called Pest Control. It's a Dr. Donna adventure, and that's the cover right there. It won't let me enlarge it. I don't know what's going on with Goodreads on my Kindle right now, but it's not cooperating. But this one was okay. Donna is actually one of my favorite companions. I really like her. I think she's hilarious. But this story just wasn't my favorite. Like, I didn't really enjoy the villains that much. But of course, the audiobook itself was 10 out of 10 stars because David Tennant. But I gave the book itself about a 3 star, I believe. And then last up of the David Tennant Doctor Who audiobooks, I listened to The Last Voyage, which was really not good. I believe it was just the 10th Doctor, and it was really boring. I'm not gonna lie. I would not have finished it if it wasn't so short, and it was David Tennant reading it to me, so I gave that one 2 stars on Goodreads. Then while I was on that really short audiobook kick, I also picked up Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them because I found out it was narrated by Eddie Redmayne, who plays Newt Scamander in the new Fantastic Beasts movies. And this was fantastic. Pardon the accidental pun. But I gave this 4 stars. It was really well done. Like, it's literally just a glossary of a bunch of magical creatures, but Eddie Redmayne was reading them to me. Some of the creatures were actually ones I've never heard of, so being the Harry Potter nerd that I am, I loved getting all of this random information about the magical beasts. But yeah, if you're a big Harry Potter fan, definitely recommend this audio. And then Tome Topple happened, which I actually read like pretty much all physical things for Tome Topple, or at least I had a physical book of everything that I read for Tome Topple like already in my house, which was the goal. I was trying to get my physical books read, and the first of those that I read was 3 Souls by Jenny Chang. This is Kate's favorite book. She yelled at me for not mentioning that this is her favorite book in my vlog, in which I talked about it a little bit for Tome Topple, and I read this in like 1 day. Like, I had started to read this back in November or December of last year, and I was just not in a reading mood at that time. Like, I was in a 17 hole, I believe, during that time, and was literally barely reading at all, let alone physically. And then I found out this had an audiobook, so I decided to pick it up again for Tome Topple, because it's like just barely 500 pages, so it counted for Tome Topple. And then I just had a headache that day, so I laid down and just listened to the audiobook, like, at work. And then when I got home, I just kind of laid down and continued to listen to it, and then I finished it like the next morning or something. So I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4.5 stars. I really liked the like Chinese culture in this, because I feel like I haven't read that many books that have Chinese culture, or like Asian culture in general. So if you do have Asian culture, or like books set in Asian countries, please let me know and leave them down below, because I need more recommendations for that. Because I want to read more of that, because as you know, I've gotten into K-pop and everything, and I've followed a lot of vloggers recently that all like film in Asian countries like China, Korea, Japan, the Philippines, like, and I'm just very immersed in that culture right now. So I'm trying to consume all kinds of media in that area. Books, I feel like it's harder to find ones like other than Haruki Murakami or like manga, which I've definitely been reading more of. But I really enjoyed this. I really liked the storytelling style of this kind of afterlife is when this takes place in, which is always something that I really enjoy. So definitely really enjoyed this. Really excited to read Jenny Chang's other books. And then the second book that I finished during Tome Topple was Malice by John Gwynne. This took me quite a while to read, but also I'm just shocked that I actually finished this giant, how many pages is this? 620 some page high fantasy novel, which I have not been reading high fantasy this year. I don't know if you've noticed, probably because I've been reading a ton of audiobooks, and high fantasy is a little bit harder for me to get into on audio, just because I have to like slow down the speed and be like, okay, who is who and what's going on. And this series doesn't have audiobooks as far as I'm aware, at least not free, in which I can find on like Overdrive, which is where I listen to most of my audiobooks. But I really enjoyed this. It did take me probably like that far in, probably like 200 or 300 pages to like actually get into the story, because it's multiple perspectives. But there were definitely quite a few perspectives that I enjoyed more than others, which always happens in multiple perspective stories, I feel like. But I really liked Corbin, who is like arguably the main character. This is very much like medieval swords and that type of fantasy. So if you don't like that, maybe this isn't for you, but I really enjoyed it by the end of it. There was also a really cool, like, almost biblical parallel of like the idea of an antichrist and a Christ. They didn't call it that, but that's very much what it felt like when it was being explained, which I did not know was a part of this series. So I'm really excited to continue with the series and see where that is taken in the following books. But I gave this 4.25 stars. And then I quickly read through the first bind up of volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Full Metal Alchemist. This is a manga that I've always wanted to read, and actually like an anime I've always wanted to watch. And now I actually want to finish reading the mangas before I get into the anime, so it might be a while before I watch the anime. But I really enjoyed this. It's really fun. I like our two main characters. I like the dynamic between them. I really liked the villains. This was actually really like decent at plot twists and stuff, which I feel like not all manga is, because I'm really good at like predicting things in regular novels, but I feel like I'm not as good at it in manga when it's written really well. Like, this is definitely written in a way that isn't simple, like I feel like a lot of manga, at least that I've read, are. So this is probably one of my favorite like first volumes of a manga that I've read in a long time, because the only other one that even compares in my mind is Death Note. I loved Death Note. I think I read it like 2 years ago, and I blew through that entire series. Very excited to continue on with this, and I gave this 4.5 stars. And then, if you watched all of my Tome Topple vlogs, you saw me complaining about how this audiobook would not come in for the life of me during Tome Topple. So I got it in like the last 2 or 3 days, but I did finish it after Tome Topple ended. And that is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This is one of those books that I've been meaning to read for years, because it's like one of those classic fantasy like series, and I wanted to at least try it. And while this was super slow, and it honestly took me quite a while to get into, like the beginning's really good and really interesting, and then it just gets bogged down somewhere in the middle. And I don't know if it was just because I was listening to it on audio, it might have been, but there was a time period where it took me a really long time to finish this audiobook. Like, it probably wasn't actually that long, but like I wasn't super excited to pick it up, so take that information as you will. So I did enjoy this. I think I gave it a 3.5 stars because there are characters that I like. There are elements of like the magic and the world that I like, but I also got the feeling that this is very dense. It's very densely written because it was written, I believe, in like the 80s or 90s. And it very much feels like really old fantasy, which is not something I've read a lot of because a lot of the fantasy that I've read is more recent, I want to say. So yeah, this took a minute to get into. I don't know if I would recommend it. I probably have to read more of the series. I do own the second book, so I'm definitely going to continue this series on audiobook. I also feel like the audiobook narrator was not my favorite, so I don't even know if I recommend the audiobooks. I did get used to him as it went along, but yeah, that was probably another factor in why I found this kind of boring at times. But I do like the world. I like where it's going. I like the idea of the Aes Sedai and that the like power wielders in this world are women, which is not something you see very often. So I am going to be continuing, but I'm very, very cautious about my enjoyment level, I guess. And then the last thing that I have finished recently is Hear the Wind Sing and Pinball 1973, which is the backside of this. This is definitely a weird book in the fact that half of it is pinball, and then if you flip it over, the other half is Hear the Wind Sing. So I did not read this physically, but I imagine that would be very confusing when you get to the middle of the book reading physically and it's suddenly upside down. But I listened to this on audio. It was a really short audiobook, and quite frankly, I really didn't like it. I gave Hear the Wind Sing like 2 stars. It was definitely my least favorite of the two because there was just really nothing about it that I found interesting, and it's like Murakami's very first novel, so I wasn't really expecting that much. But you know, I've only read one of his other books, which was The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, and I really enjoyed that one. So I am definitely going to be picking up the rest of his books because it's Kate's favorite author, and I really like his like weird, nonsensical writing style. But I definitely preferred Pinball 1973, but only slightly more. I think I gave it a 3.5 stars, somewhere in between there. And it was about this like pinball machine, which I think I'm a little bit biased toward pinball machines, even though one, I'm very bad at them. I tried to play them a lot as a kid and I just can't. But this is a random way to relate this. I grew up on the movie musical Tommy, which is like by The Who, I believe. And there's a song in there called Pinball Wizard, and it's like very related to this pinball machine. So like that was giving me Tommy vibes because Tommy's kind of a really nonsensical musical, and so I think that was why I kind of liked pinball a little bit more, just because I had something to relate it to. Not that it really has anything to do with the story other than the pinball machine, but there you go. That's probably, quite frankly, why I liked it more. So I gave Hear the Wind Sing 2 stars and Pinball 1973 3.5 stars. I don't know if I said that. So yeah, that is my recent wrap-up of books that I've read in the last month or so. I actually have physical books to hold up this time. Whoa, what a concept. But thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.